Grok Talk, brought to you by the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and the bloggers at granitegrok.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Just look for Grok Talk. Granite Grok, sorry. Look for Granite Grok on Facebook and Twitter. We don't have a Grok Talk version yet. You could look for me, NH Steve McD. Skip uses the Granite Grok as his Twitter, so if you want to see what's going on in his mind, go over there. Plus, all our posts go to Twitter.
Yeah.
So
generally, the only time you get a piece of my mind on Twitter is during some kind of a debate that I'm watching on TV or some kind of rally type stuff. But generally, I'm not a Twitterer. I don't tweet out an awful lot. But when I do...
You do?
I do a
tweet
whole...
storm.
Yeah, it's a tweet storm.
Okay.
Snark.
So back to Liberty. It's a great subject.
Well, and
subject.
we were talking in the break about when you look at some of the legislators and the grades that they have earned, you're going, what? Really? The selection process for the bills, obviously there are criteria, and you can't look at all of them, and you have to have, I would think, not a narrow universe, but a pretty well identified universe that constitutes or does not constitute liberty. How's that input work?
Well, we're looking at the bills that are on the calendar each week in both the House and the Senate, and looking for the bills that have a liberty impact. They're clear from a liberty perspective, and we take stances on those bills in our gold standard sheet. And then any of those bills that are on the gold standard that receive a roll call vote, then those are used for the grading. If I look, I do also look through, and the other members of the board, especially our political director, Kevin Bloom, and our research director, Tim O'Flaherty, look through the additional bills that received, all the bills really that received roll call votes. And, I think we really have captured all of the bills that were clear from a liberty perspective that received a roll call vote. Now, the grades, I think, in the House are much more comprehensive, I would say, because in the Senate we have the issue that we talked about a minute ago with Steve, which is there really aren't nearly as many roll calls as we would like to see. So all we can do is grade the senators on the roll calls that we have. But in the House, we have many more bills that we can grade based on, and I think the grades in the House are actually very. I think they're very very good and very.
I think so
robust.
too, because it says right here that Stephen Shurtleff is a constitutional threat.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Looking here at Senate Bill 135 on page 2, relative to lead poisoning in children.
Yes.
Now, certainly everyone's opposed to lead poisoning in children.
Yes.
But just reading the title of that bill, how does that? What are the liberty implications, or do you recall?
Yeah. So that.
You're like, well, who would want to poison children? Well, but how is that a liberty issue?
Well, there were that bill was, of course, they like to create titles for bills. This is not as big of a problem in New Hampshire as it is in D.C., but politicians like to create titles for bills that make it sound,
Of course.
But what that bill actually did is it created a lot more restrictions for additional testing requirements for rental units and some other additional what we would consider property, the government getting farther involved in property to an extent that was really not necessary as far as what's really, really needed to protect people from lead poisoning. So, really arduous requirements that would have raised the costs of renting even higher than they are already.
But then Maggie can come out and say that Republican voted for a bill that, or opposed a bill that would have dealt with poisoning children, right?
Yes, and that they love to use that kind of rhetoric. But
you have to
when you
come out and
actually
defend
dig
it.
into the bill and you read what it's actually doing.
Oh my God! People don't read bills.
Exactly. The truth is the current. There is not a necessity for farther, more arduous testing requirements.
It's like the paint disposal bill, the paint tax, and all of
the
that.
Stewardship. It's stewardship. Use the right words. Stevie.
We're gonna feed this new bureaucracy and create some cronies, some rent seekers, and then we're gonna tax people on an everyday product that we really have no problem with disposing of now, but because we want a bigger bureaucracy, this is how we're gonna go at it, and that's probably what this was. And
I mean, really, when you talk about the whole idea of liberty, it's a case of It is the elites who decide that we ordinary people can't do things right. And the only way that right is defined by them. That they take that we cannot allow you to harm yourself is really what it comes down to.
Straight jacket.
Well, that's really what it comes down to.
Let my hand out so I can vote for a Democrat. Okay.
And for those people who say, well, we have to have government involved because we want a safe and secure environment, I mean, where is the line when it comes to freedom and liberty and responsibility for oneself? And it seems like a lot of these bills come out that say you aren't responsible for yourself. We have to have government responsible for you in all things. Is that kind of summarizing this?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And when we create or government creates these sort of one-size-fits-all regulatory structures, inevitably it ends up creating harm for people. People that weren't intended to be impacted perhaps by the legislation, or maybe they were, depending on the case. But, I think of licensing requirements, and New Hampshire is a great state politically in many ways, but we're not doing real well on licensing requirements. And that's an example where people in industry will get in and try to create lots of barriers to entry for people who want to enter a particular trade and try to protect themselves from competition. And we saw that with some bills. Actually, one of the bills I think it got a roll call and was on here on mold remediation services. And they're always every year trying to create several new licensing requirements, and it ends up hurting the consumer ultimately because the consumer has less choice. The real accountability in industry is based on reputation, not whether somebody filled out some paperwork and got paid a fee to get a license. So. There are a lot of examples where government is creating these rules to supposedly protect people, but it actually ends up restricting their ability to make their own choices and to flourish.
No, and I understand that because a while ago Seattle decided to raise its minimum wage to $15. I got a bunch of book tab posts that already they're starting to see negative results of raising that minimum wage arbitrarily just because it would be a living wage, that while some people are getting more, there are a lot of people who are now losing their jobs because some businesses are closing because they can't afford it, or they're doing what most people will do in normally hard times. Now government has made it an arbitrarily a hard time. They're laying people off, firing them, and the people who are left have to do much, much more. So who does it really help? And then those, in this case, who normally would need an entry-level job to be able to start on their way upwards are denied those lower rungs because economically they're not worth hiring. And liberals hate that idea.
But my favorite was that there were people who got that raise who said, I only want to work part-time now because if I make too much money, I lose all my free benefits.
Yeah.
Well, I forget, somebody out in Washington, I think that was just losing her mind because she says, I've worked at a fast food place for 8 years, and I still hadn't reached $15 an hour. Now,
I can know what's coming.
You just got to ask the question: really? You worked there for 8 years, and you haven't gotten a raise?
She hasn't gotten $15 an hour.
Apparently, she hasn't gotten $15. But I mean, it's all kind of nutty.
There's managers that don't make that much. But I worked there. I worked at McDonald's in high school. Started at $2.35 an hour. Went to college. When I came back, after I discovered that college really wasn't for me, I went into the management program. And within a short period of time, I was making really good money. The hours suck. The job has to deal with public a lot, which if you don't like that, but I did it for years. You can make really good money working there. And it doesn't take a lot. You can apply yourself to any position like that and be successful. If it took her 8 years, she might not have been in a situation where that was possible.
Who knows? But
it's really intended to be, these low-wage jobs are intended to be a place for young people to get into the the world of working, and you get experience.
Yeah, like me.
And you need that first step in order to move up farther. It's not intended to be an ending point where you stop at $10 an hour and you have a spouse at home and you raise a family of 4 and you have a house with a car in the garage. It's not the stopping point. It's the starting point. And if you remove those starting rungs, I saw. I think it's been around a little while, but I really like. There's a political comic with a ladder, and it shows the first several rungs of the ladder broken off, cut off.
Oh yeah, yep.
And the politician says to the young person, looking at the ladder, trying to climb it, "Congratulations, I've raised your minimum wage." And I think it's really true when you have to have a starting point to move farther, and if you make it difficult for people to get a job at all, then they have no starting point and they can't advance. And I think that's also a problem a lot of times with welfare and in cases where it can be abused. But it's also cases where it's harmful to the people receiving the benefits, because in the short term it looks like a better. Why would you take a job at $9 an hour if you could get the equivalent of 10 or 11 or whatever it is in benefits? But you're stuck in that situation. Then it's like a trap, and you can't then progress past that. 10 years down the line, you're still getting the same amount of help, whereas if you had a job, you could then be getting experience and advancing. So it really does a disservice to people sometimes, I think, in those situations.
And, you're absolutely right, because there is a crash point where as you're trying to ramp up your own earnings, there is a very steep drop-off in those welfare benefits. That one extra dollar is the cliff instead of doing a slow slide. Now, I've always said that there needs to be a safety net, but my wife and I had a daycare center for 4 or 5 years, and we saw the people who decided it's easier because they were earning $30,000, $40,000 equivalent of benefits. They said, "Why should I?" And they were just perfectly happy, and that was it. And those are the kinds of people that I wasn't too impressed with. We did have some single moms. In fact, I ran into one just the other day. I mean, she looked at it as a hand up.
I got to cut you off because we only have about 30 seconds left, and I want Paul to give us contact info for NHLA and himself.
The website is probably the best way to learn more. That's nhliberty.org, and you can see all of these Liberty ratings on the left-hand side, as well as our gold standard. And on the top right-hand side, you can join or donate, and we have a PAC. We donate to candidates, so we'd really, we have a cycle coming up soon, and help on that would be appreciated. All of the board's contact information is also on the About page on the website.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming in. We hope to talk to you again soon. All right. Let me turn off a couple headsets here while You just... Oh, okay. Thanks. I can keep going. Excellent. This is Grok Talk. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Susan Olson, Paul Best, and Darlene Pollock. Our next guest is in studio, and we're going to come right back after a very short break to continue our conversation, this one on life, and some positive and affirming news instead of the stuff we're used to hearing.
The 603 Alliance held its second training seminar on Tuesday, August 11, 2015 at St. Anselm's Institute of Politics, and despite the heavy storms throughout the area, the turnout was fantastic. After introductions and a brief overview of who the 603 Alliance and CBL New Hampshire LLC are, the training focused on the first in the state 603 Grassroots Presidential Caucus to be held on Saturday, October 17, 2015 at the Hopkinton Fairgrounds. Procedures for the caucus were discussed, and a call to action for volunteers to help on event day was met with great enthusiasm. Almost everyone volunteered to help, and thanks to our wonderful friends from Massachusetts who have offered their assistance as caucus marshals. If you could not make the training seminar this week but would like to volunteer your time, please download the GPS Caucus sign-up form available at 603alliance.org. There are instructions on the site for where to send the form.